Blake's utterly unique work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, is an appropriate finale for this course. It embodies a searching critique of Enlightenment ideas, and yet it builds on them. The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is a totally off-the-wall challenge to normal reader expectations. It's a medley of incongruous forms: poetry, proverbs, allusions to contemporary people, parodies of other writers, satiric narratives. It starts out as if it's about religion, but you soon see it's about politics too, and psychology, and the whole way we understand ourselves in the world. In a single lecture, I can't take up everything in this densely packed work. I'm going to concentrate on certain parts that directly address the themes of this course, together with some illuminating parallels from other works by Blake. And at the end, I'll talk about a poem from the Songs of Experience called London that condenses everything into one short masterpiece. The title page of The Marriage of Heaven and Hell shows at the top pairs of lovers strolling or sitting under some leafless trees in a very calm and colorless scene. But underneath them, fierce flames are pouring upward in a nether sky. And at the bottom, two soaring figures are kissing in a kind of twisted embrace full of athletic energy. The conventional idea, of course, was heaven is up above and the torments of hell fire down below. Blake's idea is we need to rethink the entire symbolism that heaven and hell have represented. Maybe the flames down below aren't all bad after all. So this is how Blake puts it, as soon as we get a little way into his text. Without contraries is no progression. Attraction and repulsion, reason and energy, love and hate are necessary to human existence. From these contraries spring what the religious call good and evil. Good is the passive that obeys reason. Evil is the active springing from energy. Good is heaven, evil is hell. Blake is phrasing this in religious terms, but the opposition he's talking about goes far beyond that. Practically every philosophy before the Romantic period was hierarchical. Certain values were on top, others below, generally reason on top, passions below. And even when a writer like Hume said, reason is and ought to be the slave of the passions, what he meant was natural instincts, not violent passions like love and hate. Now, Blake is not trying to merely invert the hierarchy, putting passion on top and reason below. He's calling for a dynamic union of these oppositions that we all experience in our lives. A marriage is a union of two very different people. There will always be some tension in it, like that pair of figures at the bottom of the title page. But according to Blake, that's as it should be. And the great insight of the Romantic thinkers in general was that human nature is dynamic. So instead of trying to suppress parts of ourselves, as traditional psychology and ethics taught, or trying to escape from our conflicts, as Rousseau wanted to do with his reveries in the bosom of nature, we should acknowledge our conflicts and try to make them productive. In addition, Blake was a political radical, and writing in 1790, as he was in this work, there's a very immediate context. Conservative critics of the French Revolution of 1789, such as Edmund Burke, invoked the symbolism of the fall from the Bible to associate the revolutionaries with the sin of pride, the satanic rebellion. So Blake is very deliberately rehabilitating the satanic. What he certainly doesn't mean is that cruelty is good. Far from it. What he means is energy and conflict are fundamental to human existence, whereas he believes official religion and political thought defined energy and conflict as wicked, and that was in order to make people passive and subservient. So Blake says, those who restrain desire do so because theirs is weak enough to be restrained, and the restrainer, or reason, usurps its place and governs the unwilling. That makes me think of James Boswell, afraid of his own desires, struggling to deny them, but in Blake's term, unwilling when he does that. His deepest self is in pain. You may remember Boswell, when he was trying to understand this in himself, wrote, I act passively. And that's exactly what Blake is saying. Blake continues, Desire, being restrained, by degrees becomes passive till it is only the shadow of desire. Likewise, Blake rejects the dualism of flesh and spirit, but also rejects its empiricist revision as the dualism of body and mind. And he's especially indignant that religion teaches, as he puts it, that God will torment man in eternity for following his energies. And in opposition to that, Blake asserts, energy is the only life and is from the body, and reason is the bound or outward circumference of energy. So this way, reason is the shaping form that keeps energy from being chaotic and diffuse, just as in Blake's art, a bounding outline would control the shape of the energy within. But it's the energy that's crucial, and Blake adds the concise comment, energy is eternal delight. Empiricism was all about the pursuit of knowledge, and with that motto, sapere aude, dare to know, the philosophes challenged the traditional story of the fall, the story in which Adam and Eve disobeyed the original command, ate the forbidden fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, Blake completely agrees with the Enlightenment in rejecting that. But he does not agree that knowledge should be reduced to epistemology, those bits of sense data we collect and recombine. He wrote a work very early called There Is No Natural Religion, in which he explicitly condemns Enlightenment assumptions about knowledge. Man's perceptions, Blake says, are not bounded by organs of perception. He perceives more than sense, though ever so acute, can discover. If it were not for the poetic or prophetic character, the philosophical and experimental would soon be at the ratio of all things and stand still, unable to do other than repeat the same dull round over again. This is Blake's view of empiricism. It ties itself down to a world where nothing is real except sense data, and this becomes a closed circuit going round and round the same dull round over and over, like the orbits of the planets in the Newtonian universe. But although Blake rejects the epistemological definition of knowledge, he does agree with the philosophe that knowledge is a positive good. Like them, he rejects the story of the fall, which ends with an angel with a flaming sword posted at the entrance to the Garden of Eden to make sure the human race never gets in again. And here's what Blake says in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. The cherub with his flaming sword is hereby commanded to leave his guard at the tree of life, and when he does, the whole creation will be consumed and appear infinite and holy, whereas it now appears finite and corrupt. This will come to pass by an improvement of sensual enjoyment. Theology taught the world will be burned up in a last judgment at the very end of time that will bring the end of the universe as we know it, and will then condemn to torment in hell those sinners who are denied salvation. Blake holds the true last judgment is an interior breakthrough that perceives the whole universe as already spiritually transformed. In another work, he said, whenever any individual rejects error and embraces truth, a last judgment passes upon that individual. And in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, the passage about the angel with the flaming sword concludes like this. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern. Blake is recalling Plato's myth of the cave, in which the whole human race is like prisoners chained in a cave, unable to do more than guess at the true reality outside, which throws flickering shadows on the cave walls. And in a number of places in his works, Blake likens the empiricist self to those prisoners chained down in the cave of the skull, trying to make sense of the flickering images projected on our retinas from outside. And what we need to understand, Blake is saying, is that the true spiritual world isn't somewhere else, as Plato and Christianity both taught. It's right here, if only we can cleanse the doors of perception and see it truly. Jim Morrison was a reader of Blake. That's why he called his band The Doors. So why shouldn't we reject the body, as religion seemed to teach? Because the body is, in fact, our source of energy and understanding. But neither should we merely gratify it, the way Merteuil does so destructively in Les Liaisons Dangereuses. Blake says what we need is an improvement of censure. I can't take up everything in this densely packed work. I'm going to concentrate on certain parts that directly address the themes of this course, together with some illuminating parallels from other works by Blake. And at the end, I'll talk about a poem from the Songs of Experience called London that condenses everything into one short masterpiece. Blake's utterly unique work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, is an appropriate finale for this course. It embodies a searching critique of Enlightenment ideas, and yet it builds on them. The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is a totally off-the-wall challenge to normal reader expectations. It's a medley of incongruous forms: poetry, proverbs, allusions to contemporary people, parodies of other writers, satiric narratives. It starts out as if it's about religion, but you soon see it's about politics too, and psychology, and the whole way we understand ourselves in the world. In a single lecture, figures are kissing in a kind of twisted embrace full of athletic energy. The conventional idea, of course, was heaven is up above and the torments of hell fire down below. Blake's idea is we need to rethink the entire symbolism that heaven and hell have represented. The title page of The Marriage of Heaven and Hell shows at the top pairs of lovers strolling or sitting under some leafless trees in a very calm and colorless scene. But underneath them, fierce flames are pouring upward in a nether sky. And at the bottom, two soaring